I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Michele Gay, a mother and educator who chose to take action after losing her daughter, Josephine Grace, at the Sandy Hook school tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut. She went on to co-found and is now serving as executive director of the nonprofit Safe and Sound Schools. Michele is a passionate advocate for improving safety and security in schools across the nation. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see you.
Great to see you, always. So our thoughts go back to Newtown, December 14th, 2012. What would you like to share about that day and as a starting point for our conversation?
Sure. You and I talk a lot about resiliency, and I think we all experience things in our lives and sort of look back. And I know I get asked all the time, how did you make it? How are you still standing? How are you doing it? And I think, that morning when the world was still spinning as it should have been and should be today, I had a particular skill set of resilience. I wasn't really aware of it, but my life, my family, my network, my education, my experiences had provided for me unwittingly a bit of a safety net, and it really did help me get through that day. That morning, it was like, everybody says this, but it was like any other morning, right? It was a Friday, and we were excited. It was close to the holidays, so the kids were very excited about getting to school and not doing any actual schoolwork. And I got all my girls off to school, and I had no sooner sat down on the couch to catch my breath when the phone started ringing, and it was notification that the emergency notification, and the world as I now know it, just completely changed, in an instant. So I think this topic of resiliency, it's ever more important now as the world has become and continues to become more and more complicated. But I look back at that day, and as difficult and painful, it was the most difficult and painful day of my life. The resiliency was, that sort of framework that I had, that built-in skill set, if you will, is really what carried me through that day and really helped me to carry my family through that day and the weeks and months and years now past the tragedy.
You talk about that network, and that's what I'm thinking. You've presented at our annual Resilience Summits. I've presented at your annual School Safety Summits. And a shared characteristic of our educational events is this cross-sector collaboration, right? We have families and school safety experts and psychologists, mental health professionals, fire, law enforcement, and many more. Why is that so important to bring together all of these various helping professionals in this type of educational endeavor?
So it's everything, right? Whatever you face in your life, to have this vast network of people with the skills and experience that you will need to draw upon to move forward, that was a key gift that I had, walking into that day. And so, I think as an educator, an elementary school teacher, that network was something I relied upon on a regular basis to serve the needs of my students and their families. So it just kind of made sense and became how I operated, as a parent, as a member of the Newtown community and the Sandy Hook school community. And I carry that into my work now, as we've talked about, taking your pain and putting it to purpose. It doesn't work for everybody, but that's something that has really helped me find some kind of meaning and some kind of way to keep myself grounded, keep my feet on the ground, and be connected and be purposeful while I'm here on this earth.
So we also share a framework of building capacity before, during, and after crisis. So let's kind of look at those three pieces. What is one thing or a few things you would like our listeners to understand about that crisis prevention piece?
So I think in terms of our community and our experience, suffering the school shooting tragedy, we look back on what got us to that day, and what happened in a young man's life, a young man from our very small community, with the resources that we had, with the school systems we had, the families, that were all around, that could have helped. How did that happen? And I think the prevention piece that we look at a lot is that safety net. Is everybody involved? Is everyone connected? And when I look back on the family of our attacker, although those resources existed in the community, that larger safety net of support, they were very disconnected from that. And as a result, this young man was able to succumb to profound mental illness, and then, carry out his very tragic plan, resulting in the loss of 26 lives, and just the utter devastation of our school community.
And you're so world making in your approach, and that compassion, for all, including the perpetrator, is really a beautiful thing, and part of, I think, why your work is so impactful and so healing. So looking at that crisis response, you do a lot in crisis response. I've been on the phone this week with post-suicide contagion, and we get these calls to come into communities and schools after the bad stuff happens. What wisdom would you like to share about that phase?
So again, that network, I just hung up from a crisis support network that I work with nationally, and we were just talking about this very thing. What types of things, what best practices can we put in place for our communities, so that if our prevention efforts, despite our best efforts, are not enough, and someone does fall through the cracks, as happened in our community in Sandy Hook, how will we respond in a way that will, mitigate further trauma and pain and suffering, and help folks in that postvention phase to find recovery, find meaning, pick up the pieces, and begin to put the left foot in front of the right foot. And I think it comes back to that network, right? You cannot do this alone. I don't think we're meant to. I think, the more different perspectives and folks that we can connect to, and apply some of their lessons learned to our own, the better, the stronger, the more resilient we will be. I know for myself, in that deep, dark moment of trying to process what had happened, and the loss of our youngest daughter, and the experiences of our two other school-age children, I needed other people that had suffered something. It didn't have to be exactly what I had suffered, but I remember connecting with other survivors of other types of trauma and suffering. Holocaust survivors, their stories were incredibly helpful to me. I could relate on a level that I can't explain to other people who had suffered something and had found a way forward. I could look at them and I could see they're still standing, they're still breathing, they're still helping others, they're still a part of this world and connected. So there must be a way. I can figure this out.
Beautiful, that sharing of experience, as well as the expertise and the resources, but that direct experience of someone living in a way that gives you hope in your darkest time is really powerful. Then we had the recovery phase, and this is one I think you and I could talk all day about. So much to say, and you've touched upon it a bit in your story, with phrases of healing with purpose, or intentional recovery process. Talk a bit about that recovery phase and that journey.
So you just said the most important word, and that's journey, right? I think everybody, if I could give one nugget of wisdom that I have picked up along the way, it's that it is a journey, there is never going to be this, date on the calendar, this goal post you can, I guess, reach or meet to say, I'm done. I did it. It's over. Thank goodness. It's just, that's not how it works. And the sooner we can come to grips with that and realize that this is a process, and let's be honest, a lifelong process, whatever it is that an individual is facing or recovering from, I think the smarter we can work toward our own healing and recovery.
And I'm thinking of Newtown, and people came together in a shared mission. And then there were different groups who had very different ways and different approaches about that. And I remember being impacted when you were talking about that at one of our summits, because you talked about it with such grace and giving people permission to heal in their own way and have their journey. Talk a bit about that, whether it's specific to your experience, in Newtown, or what you've seen over time about how important it is to be honoring each other's journeys.
Yeah, my daughter's middle name was Grace, and I really had to be intentional about practicing that grace for those around me. And I'm sure others had to do the same for me. We were all the walking wounded, we still are. And we were all, I think, called to move forward in different ways. And sometimes those ways, rubbed up against someone the wrong way or hurt someone. And it continues to be challenging to this day, to be able to step back and say, okay, this person really needs that, and I will do my best to work around that and communicate when I'm hurt, or when someone is doing something that is harmful to my healing. But yeah, I think there's a misconception that people have that following a tragedy, everyone's going to be together and move forward, and there's going to be this shared purpose. And I have yet to see that. People really heal and move forward in their own ways. And I think we need to appreciate that and have grace for it.
You took my words there. I was going to say, I have yet to see that. So very true. And even I remember you saying too, you turned outward. That's where you were. Your husband turned inward, and that's who he was. And so even within families, there's a lot going on. So great stuff. Viewers, when we return, Michelle's advice on helping your kids navigate the pandemic. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Michele Gay, co-founder and executive director of Safe and Sound Schools. So Michele, COVID, let's talk a bit about the pandemic and specifically the social emotional impacts on our kids. What can parents who are listening do to help buffer some of the negative impacts that we're seeing on our kids?
So I think the first thing is probably the hardest, and that is to take a step back and look at how you're caring for yourself as a parent. The whole analogy with the oxygen mask in the plane is pretty tired, but it's so true. Mm-hmm. If you are walking around stressed and full of anxiety, dealing with any number of stressors throughout this pandemic, as most people are, your kids are picking up on it, and they're living it and breathing it and worrying and adding that to their pile of worries as well. So, just taking a breath and practicing gratitude in all situations. I know that seems like a challenge in many of these days and for many of our families, but it works. It really works. Just, looking at the glass half full and thinking, okay, what do I have? What can I be grateful for? And modeling that for your children, I think, is so critically important. And then another thing that I think is surprising for a lot of people to hear me say as a former educator is, don't worry. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. Don't worry so much about the kids falling behind. they're incredible. They are little resiliency factories in and of themselves, and they're going to pick back up. And the sort of gaps and delays that we're seeing, as a result of the pandemic, eventually they will catch up. What is the most important thing right now? It's probably not that academic trajectory that your child had been on. It's probably more important that their mental health, their social skills, their sense of safety, all of those things are intact through these very trying times. Because without those things, there's not going to be that pickup of progress and that academic skill building that we want to see our kids get back to. So taking a breath and really being mindful about the connectedness, helping our children find ways to be connected to others, to family, to friends, however, virtually or possibly outdoors. We're heading into spring. The connectedness is paramount to that social emotional development and growth, and that underlies academics. So let's start there.
Yeah. So foundational, that social emotional piece. We're at an interesting part of the pandemic journey. What part hasn't been interesting, right? But this school hesitancy we're seeing, where schools are reopening, and yet there's families or kids that are experiencing a lot of stress and worry about returning to in-person. What's going on with this?
So many things are going on in my own house, for example, and I'm sure yours too. The type of hesitancy I'm seeing is less about fear of getting sick or causing illness to other loved ones, and more about, you know what, I've kind of got this virtual thing down, and it's easier. And I can go to school in my pajamas, and I have more time, and I can even work a part-time job. So there are a lot of factors to what we're identifying as hesitancy. For other families, there are very real concerns. There are immunocompromised family members. There is concern about this vaccine that has been developed quicker, more quickly than any other vaccine that we know of in modern times. So there are a lot of questions, and I think the information that we've been receiving over the past 18 months has been so varied and so all over the place and so changing rapidly, that it's understandable that people would be a little bit scared, have some trepidation about returning. And then the other layer is just that we've almost had to reprogram ourselves, right, to survive, to get through this time, to socialize differently, to live our lives differently, and now suddenly it's okay to walk outside without a mask, and it's okay to be around people. There is a psychological sort of transformation, I guess, or transition that needs to happen for us to start to feel comfortable with that. And so I think baby steps, we just need to own that. If there's hesitancy for any reason, identify it, put our finger on it, talk about it within our families and within our classrooms and our communities, and just help people through it. We'll get through it. We've gotten through much worse in the past 18 months, but it's real. Hesitancy is real.
Yeah, and multifactored. You reminded me of a video that we just put out called "Breaking the Bubble." But some of those pieces that can help. Do you need information? Do you need to be looking at unmet needs? Is it the need for safety? Is that psychological or physical, or all of that kind of breaking down? Yeah. So a shout out to worldmakerinternational.org and pandemic parenting. We have a lot of resources there, and a shout out to Michelle's extraordinary website, www.safeandsoundschools.org, and a lot more resources there that we can go beyond what we can cover here. So I spent some time, like I said, in the field and with schools and teachers this week, and I mentioned we were having this discussion. I said, do you guys have any questions? And they said, oh, so many questions. So I'm really sorry, these aren't really softballs, but you're going to help people. So the first question: a big part of physical and psychological safety is consistently having trusted adults in our kids' lives. Sadly, some kids go through their whole life with any adults they've grown trust with leaving. Now we're seeing a really high level of turnover in our schools. What can we do when staff members leave to create an environment that facilitates healthy transitions for students?
It is so hard. It was hard for me as a teacher when, I would change to a different building or a different grade, or, students would be leaving that building and moving on. I mean, I remember struggling with it and watching some of my students struggle with that too. If I'm their trusted adult and I'm no longer a part of their everyday or even in the same physical space as them, that's a real challenge. So I think the more we can do to help our students, our young people identify other, trusted individuals, and what are the characteristics that you need to look for, in that trusted adult, so that you have more than one. And one thing that I think is really amazing, I look at my two teenage girls, and they have maintained connection, and I've encouraged them to with some of their teachers via, social media. Back when I was a classroom teacher, we didn't go anywhere near social media. It was kind of a no-no. But it can be an incredible tool to stay in touch with people, to stay connected, to let your teachers know of successes and difficulties, and have that connection maintained. But I think the more that we can do to encourage, if you are the trusted adult, and very often it's just one trusted adult that a child has, help them broaden that network, share the honor, and help them identify how to find others in their life that can be part of that safety net for them. I think that's critically important.
Absolutely. I think you and I both hear quite often teachers are not trained for this, right? And so the next question falls in that category. We seem to deal with big crises such as natural disasters or shootings by pushing resources and developing short-term relationships. So there's already some problems with that. Goes on, even worse, we give little attention to helping students after everyday disruptions, such as when a student in crisis completely disrupts the learning environment or even destroys property. Our teachers don't have protocols in place to manage mental health or behavior for the individual students, and they often overlook the real impact on bystanders. We seem to expect students to simply move on, and yet when they return, they face real destruction and loss. What comes up for you with that question?
When you say that, I think of a very specific incident that happened in my classroom when I was teaching second grade in Virginia. And one of my most favorite students, we all have students that we have to spend extra time with, have to provide extra support for. And this student was having a very bad day. And, I had exhausted just about every tool in my toolbox while trying to teach the rest of the class, but could visibly see that he was struggling. And he continued to boil and bubble, and ended up, throwing chairs across the classroom, and really just full on melting down. And I remember somehow having the presence of mind to busy the other children, and kind of scurry this child over to the other side of the classroom and just take some time. I remember being taken aback kind of by how the rest of the students were watching me. They were watching to see how I was handling this, how what my reaction was, if I was upset. They were taking their cues from me as to if they needed to be worried for themselves, basically. So, once we got him situated and calmed down, and I was able to get the school counselor there to come and help him, I remember realizing, okay, we can't just go back to reading now. We actually have to talk about this. We have to, I have to explain, and we have to talk about how we're going to move forward together. And I just learned from my children that day. I learned from my students how very important it is to just stop and talk about it, and put your fingers on it, before anyone can even think about moving on. And sometimes you can't. So sometimes we're just going to take a break. We're going to go outside. We're going to have a change of scenery, things like that. I just kind of learned on the fly, because you're right. There's not a lot of preparation or training for our teachers and our school staff in this area.
So one last question we're going to squeeze in here. When we think of school culture, certainly it's the trusted adults. It's also the students. And so this last question is, what suggestions do you have for students to help their peers feel safe? What can students do to help each other?
I think one thing that a disservice we do to our students, our youth in school communities, is leave them this sort of idea that they have to be friends with everyone. And I think, for my own children, in discussion, for them to realize you don't have to be friends with everyone, but you do need to look out for everyone, and you do need to be kind and compassionate to everyone. And so that has really served my own children on several occasions. When they would see that someone else was struggling or having a hard time, they don't necessarily need to go solve the problem, but having recognized it, can they then go to a trusted adult and say, you know what, I saw this and it really troubled me. I think there's something that we need to do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michele. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.